out of sales. The Wolf of Wall Street, as he said.
We've all seen the Wolf of Wall Street, the outrageous parties, the insane money, and the sky-high lifestyle. But how much of it was real? The truth is even crazier than you think.
It's sort of an exciting thing because you're making big decisions in split seconds. You know, you're buying in one place and selling in another. And if you make a good deal, you yell hooray. And if you have a bad deal, you say, oh no, and utter some profanity or something like that.
This isn't just the Hollywood version. This is the real story. The rise and fall of the most notorious scam artist on Wall Street. A man who turned penny stocks into a financial empire, lived like a king, and fell harder than anyone before him. This story isn't just about money. It's about excess, corruption, and the price of chasing the American dream at all costs. Jordan Belfort wasn't born into wealth. He was born into the middle-class streets of Queens, New York in 1962. He had big dreams of making millions, but early on, he had no idea just how far he'd be willing to go to make that happen. At first, he started with an honest hustle, selling ice cream at the beach. But selling a few cones wasn't enough for him. Jordan wanted more. He wanted the kind of money that could buy private jets and mansions. So he set his sights on Wall Street. He landed his first job at LF Rothschild, a respected investment firm, where he was mentored by high-powered brokers who taught him how to close deals. It was here he learned the golden rule of Wall Street. It doesn't matter if the client wins or loses. What matters is that you make a commission. But then came Black Monday. The 1987 stock market crash wiped out everything.
Good evening. Today is Black Monday, the day the Dow dropped more than 500 points, the day the Dow dropped more than 22%, almost double the rate of the Black Monday that signaled the beginning of the crash of 1929. But this crash of 1987 is not just an American experience. Around the world, stock markets fell faster than a skydiver without a parachute. The panic starting in Tokyo this morning while the West slept. One cause of the sell-off was reaction to last week's 236-point drop in the Dow. The result, the Nikkei average was down 260 yen.
Jordan found himself jobless. But did he quit? No. He reinvented himself, and this is where the madness truly begins. Jordan didn't want to make money, he wanted to dominate. He discovered penny stocks, cheap, obscure stocks that no one cared about, and realized something. If he could sell these stocks to unsuspecting investors at a huge markup, he could make a fortune. This is where he started his own firm, Stratton Oakmont. Similar to the movie, Jordan recruited an army of brokers, guys with no experience, no finance degrees, just raw hunger for money. He trained them in a straight line persuasion method, turning them into selling machines. With aggressive cold calling and high pressure tactics, they convinced everyday investors to dump their life saving into worthless stocks. Then, before the stock price collapsed, Jordan and his team sold their own shares, making millions overnight, while their clients lost everything. It was a legal robbery, and it was working. It was working really well. At its peak, Stratton Oakmont was making over $50 million a year.
One of the young kids walked into the company. It's probably 24 years. I'm not going to disclose the name for now. And he was wearing a presidential Rolex, and I looked at the watch and I asked him, what do you do? And he says, I'm a stockbroker. And my question was, do you make a lot of money? He says, I made more last year than you're going to make ever in your life. My question was, how do I do it?
But Jordan wasn't just making money, he was spending it like a man possessed. He bought Ferraris on a whim, threw $1 million bachelor parties, flooded his office with drugs.
Whenever I saw him, they were always drugged up. They were always on drugs. I mean, it was amazing. The last time I saw Jordan, his eyes were out here. I mean, they were always on drugs.
His brokers, fueled by cocaine and adrenaline, worked 14-hour days, pulling in commissions that made them instant millionaires. He didn't just run a company, he built a cult. Employees worshipped him, hanging onto his every word. And as the money piled up, so did the chaos. The bigger the fraud, the bigger the target on his back. The SEC and the FBI were already watching, but Jordan was too blinded by the excess to care. With all that money, Jordan became unstoppable. He had the supercars, the private jets, the $12 million yacht once owned by Coco Chanel, and of course, a lifestyle fueled by sex and drugs. His office was a madhouse. Employees were rewarded with prostitutes, stacks of cash, and all the drugs he could consume. He hired entertainers to shock and amuse his workers, strippers, live sex shows, and even chimpanzees and roller skates. The parties were even legendary. His personal life was just as reckless. He spent millions on lavish vacations, outlandish bets, piles of drugs that will make even Hollywood's wildest stars blush. But with great fortune comes great attention, and the FBI was watching. Jordan thought he was invincible. He laundered money through Swiss banks, smuggled cash in secret compartments of private planes, and even tried to bribe officials. But his luck was running out. The walls were closing in and the government was piecing together the biggest fraud case in Wall Street history. In 1996, the feds came knocking.
Discovered was actually it was very difficult to make any progress in the beginning. The reason being, many of the brokers and many of the employees were making millions of dollars. Young guys in their early 20s, mid-20s, making millions in income. And there was really no incentive to cooperate with the FBI or with regulators. So it was very difficult for us to make sort of inroads into the fraud itself. He's a very charismatic guy. He's a very good motivational speaker. And so I knew my job would be difficult.
He was caught and charged with securities fraud and money laundering. But Jordan had one last trick up his sleeve. To avoid a massive prison sentence, he turned informant, selling out his own brokers and partners to the FBI. In the end, Jordan was sentenced to just 22 months in prison, a slap on the wrist for someone who had scammed investors out of hundreds of millions.
The saddest night of my life, for sure, was the night before I went to jail. I had to tell the kids. It wasn't like the movie they took me away. I had reported for jail, right? And my wife was on the ex-wife. We sat down with the kids on a Thursday night, and we called the kids into the living room. They're like, what's up, what's up? And I started telling my kids, I said, listen, a long time ago, that when I had that big company and I made some mistakes, and I didn't get even, as soon as I started getting even close to it, my daughter starts bursting out, hysterically crying. And my son was very young then. She just starts crying because my daughter's crying, and it's this terrible, like this just gut-wrenching scene where my daughter's like, no, she's all about laughing, and the kids are hugging me, and we're just like, just the worst thing you can imagine.
Jordan Belfort lost everything, but somehow he is still standing. After prison, he rebranded himself as a motivational speaker, selling the same persuasion tactics he used to scam people. Some call him a genius and others call him a fraud who never paid for his crimes. But one thing's for sure, Jordan Belfort is a symbol of everything that's right and wrong about the pursuit of wealth in America. The Wolf of Wall Street movie captured the craziness, but even it couldn't show everything. The real Jordan Belfort was just as wild as Leonardo DiCaprio portrayed him, perhaps even more. The outrageous office parties? Real. The yacht sinking? Also real. The movie glorified the insanity, but at its core, it was a cautionary tale. And while Belfort's crimes were entertaining on screen, in reality, they destroyed many lives.
One of his brokers named Paul Greco, and Paul says, my name's Paul Greco, I'm with Stratton Oakmont, and I was referred to you by, I can't remember the fellow's name, but he was one of my classmates at Harvard Business School. And he said, I made him a lot of money. He gave me your name, said that you were a player, that you were aggressive, that you were smart, that you'd be interested in me making you a lot of money too. And that kind of opened the dialogue.
So was he a mastermind or just another con artist?